So with the Iowa caucus now just a couple weeks away, and the polls are telling us that basically it's anyone's game, it's up for grabs. Biden, Buttigieg, Warren, or Sanders can win this and potentially even win the entire presidency. Who is going to win the presidency, and what would it look like if we happen to have had a Sanders presidency? I did a video a while back showing you what an Elizabeth Warren economy would look like and affect investors. And so in this video, what I'm going to be doing is covering Sanders because a lot of people were asking to cover more candidates. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at what a Bernie Sanders presidency would look like. Bernie Sanders does openly describe himself as a democratic socialist, so would you want a socialist in the White House? Well, according to polls, very few people would. But with a recent poll showing Bernie on top, #1 for Iowa and other states as well, he does have a good chance, so we are closer to this happening ever than before. The Vermont senator has shaken up the Democratic field, igniting crowds all over the country. Although Biden is leading in most polls, and he is probably the best person to face against Trump out of the crowd, it is looking like Bernie does have a serious chance, and so we have to take him seriously. It's worth pondering what would happen to the US markets and economy if he was in office. Analysts say his authenticity is based on the fact that he pretty much says anything he believes in, and so it would help him though if he did use that S word, socialist, a little bit less. While the US economy would look different with Sanders in the White House, it may not be as crazy as you might think. With the Sanders presidency, he would be facing a ton of hurdles to enact his policies, including Congress. And not all Democrats are on his side, so while he might have a chance of passing something through the House, it definitely wouldn't get through the Senate. But if we take legislative hurdles out of the equation, we could take a look at what the US economy would look like. Some of his notable policies are breaking up the big banks and enacting a single-payer healthcare system. He also wants to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour and those free trade agreements with China, as well as making public college tuition free by enacting a tax on Wall Street. Some experts do say his policies would lead to a roaring economy, but others strongly disagree. Most of his ideas, economic and otherwise, mostly focus on spending and not actually how we are going to pay for it. So it would either boil down to one of two things or a combination of both, either increase the deficit or hike taxes. Some analysts agree that he doesn't look at the real impact of what higher taxes would do on the overall economy, and he just basically says we'll raise more money by making taxes higher, and he doesn't look at what would happen to the overall picture of productivity. So let's take a closer look specifically at Bernie's single-payer healthcare proposal. Bernie has been proposing this for months and even years now, and what he would do is get rid of Obamacare and implement a healthcare for all, Medicare for all system. Bernie believes it would cost $1.38 trillion per year and would end up saving businesses and people $6 trillion in the long haul over the next decade. Bernie says that even though the US does not guarantee healthcare to everyone in the United States, it ends up paying 3 times per capita more than the UK, 50% more than France, and far more than what our Canadian neighbors do. Economists believe that this cost would actually end up being more than $15 trillion, and if you include 7 of his other programs, which means more spending on infrastructure, making college tuition free, and expanding Social Security, that would add another $3.5 trillion on top of that. But at the same time, the healthcare overhaul will end up saving general public $10 trillion. And the other programs on top of that would be another $1.1 trillion in savings over the next 10 years. And excluding the likelihood of higher taxes, this would also mean 7 million more jobs and another $4 trillion in economic activity by 2026. But the bad news is that regardless of all this and the money that would potentially be saved, this would greatly spook the markets. If Sanders' policies deepen the deficit budget for many years down the road, this could impact creditors and the bond market who, in the face of uncertainty, either stop giving out loans at all or drive up interest rates. In short, this could just mean it's more expensive to run the government, which could exacerbate any cost issues that a Sanders budget might face. Bill Clinton learned this the hard way when he was president, when he was forced to prioritize deficit reduction when he couldn't fulfill his spending promises. Experts also agree that a single-payer system would negatively affect the earnings of hospital chains, insurers, and the pharmaceutical companies. In recent years, these have been the best performers on the market and have benefited greatly from rising their costs in products and services. But it could actually make other sectors more profitable, like life insurance. This would happen if overall health improves and people have a longer life expectancy with better access to healthcare. So while it's a net loss in the short term, Sanders' policies could actually mean long-term savings in the long haul. Now, it's no secret that Wall Street wouldn't like a Sanders presidency, but Bernie doesn't care. He has consistently cast the financial industry as the villain, blaming them for income inequality, political corruption, and even racism. So given Sanders' rhetoric about policies and Wall Street regulation and increasing minimum wage, the market would most likely greatly react poorly to his presidency initially. But it might rebound if it was shown that Sanders' policies would be economically positive. The market plunged on the news when Obama first won presidency and was re-elected in 2012, but actually soared when Bush was re-elected in 2004. Given that Republicans are seen as having more Wall Street-friendly policies, this is not surprising at all. So the basic question that will drive everything is whether or not the financial markets believe that Sanders' numbers will just simply add up. The Vermont senator has taken great aim at the big banks and corporations and has even introduced the Too Big to Fail, Too Big to Exist Act. This would basically identify banks that are too big to fail and would also give the Treasury Secretary a year to disassemble them. He has said that this would put an end to some of the largest financial institutions in the United States, such as Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Citibank, Morgan Stanley, and Bank of America. It is believed that the Too Big to Fail Act would help the economy. This is because it would free up loans to Main Street businesses and mainstream businesses. But not everyone agrees that the end of big banks would actually benefit the economy. This is because in lieu of the 2008 crash, our bureaucrats finally got it after the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. They began bailing out systematic public and private entities. Some experts say that the crucial lessons that we should have learned from the financial crash is that America needs too big to fail banks, and in order to avoid catastrophic results, we just have to bail them out. But Sanders has also proposed higher taxes everywhere and an end to free trade. Sanders has pledged to hike taxes on the wealthy, including a progressive estate tax on the top 0.3% of Americans who inherit more than $3.5 million. He would also lift the cap on taxable income. This is the limit of annual wages or self-employment income that is subject to Social Security taxes to above $250,000. He has especially targeted big corporations, telling them to pay their fair share instead of avoiding taxes overseas by moving their profits and their jobs. And should Sanders succeed, it's not necessarily just the corporations that will be paying higher taxes, and actually corporations, experts say, don't mind paying higher taxes. They'll pay those taxes, they can afford them. Corporations will pay higher taxes so the profits to shareholders will go down, but they'll respond by increasing pricing and reducing employee compensation. So the impact of higher taxes would be spread across consumers, employees, and investors. There would also be a tax on Wall Street speculators, and he would of course want to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Experts believe that this is where we would start to see a change in the distribution of national income. It's believed that this would put the economy on a path to more stable footing. Sanders wants to reverse this and move the economy to a more stable economy and a more balanced distribution of income. But a speculation tax would most likely drive securities prices down. And on top of ending the PNTR trade agreement with China, he would also want to end NAFTA, CAFTA, and the TPP. This could bring mixed results, but could bring jobs back to the US, and that has very much resonated with voters. The theory with these trade agreements is that jobs go abroad, and whatever benefits happen are greatly overwhelmed by the loss of American jobs. According to an analysis from the Conservative Tax Foundation, Sanders' policies would raise a large amount of revenue, but would spur a national decline in growth over the long term. The group calculates that tax revenue would climb 9.8% over the next decade, but the GDP would fall 9.5%. Sanders' policies would push the US more towards the left, but it wouldn't turn the United States into a Cuba. Sanders has said that there would be a limit, but there is more work to be done. Sanders has said that the government should play a vital role in our lives, making sure that we all have a decent standard of living. Now, if you look at his executive experience as the four-term mayor of Burlington, Vermont, we might find that his bark might be tougher than his bite. He maintained the city's finances in check, and he also made sure to regulate the city's waterfront development plan successfully. He might be more pragmatic and less willing to break up financial institutions and raise corporate taxes back to where they were in the 50s. And when it comes to social issues, a Sanders presidency would definitely mean a more left-leaning progressive America, though again, not as much as you might think. He has called for sensible gun control legislation, but his voting record might show otherwise. In the state of Vermont, a state with lax gun laws, it demonstrates opposition to these policies. In the early 1990s, he voted against the Brady Bill, which would have meant background checks for firearm purchases. And in the early 2000s, he voted against a law that would make it allowable for gun victims to actually sue gun manufacturing companies. But he has pledged to fight for equal pay for women. He has pledged to fight for expanding Social Security, which would most likely impact more women, as men are less likely to be in poverty than women. He has also said that he would nominate Supreme Court justices that understand Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. He openly supports the LGBT community, and in 1983, even openly supported the first ever Pride Parade in the city. He also signed a city ordinance banning housing discrimination. And on immigration, he would sign the DREAM Act and also support a path to permanent residence. So on the right side, there is a narrative that Sanders would be too radical, too extreme, and he would drive the US into communism, but his policies may not be as extreme as others might think. It's worth keeping in mind that he probably would not be able to get a lot of the things he wants to get passed passed. And if he does not win the Democratic primary, there is a chance that he would be a running mate and a vice president pick. But I want to hear from you. Tell me down below, do you think Bernie Sanders would be a good president of the United States? What do you think he would do, and how would he impact the economy? Tell me down below in the comments. If you enjoyed that video, if you liked it, be sure to give it a big thumbs up, smash that like button. And if you'd like to see more videos from my channel, I post videos every single week covering finance, business, entrepreneurship, mindset, strategies, and tips and tricks from my own experience. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. I post videos every single week. And if you'd like to be notified every single time I upload a new one, so that you're first in line to see it before anyone else, be sure that you hit that little notification bell as well, so that we're notified every time I make a new one. See you in the next one.